It's been 4.5 years since Ethan passed away. I get very emotional about it immediately, so it'll take me just a second to relax. I just want people to understand that people feel like this is something, first of all, that's embarrassing to talk about. There's a stigma against it, and people feel like this is something that will never happen to them or in their family. And it's completely false. Happens everywhere, every type of economic situation, rich, poor, middle class, countryside, city side, it doesn't matter where. So people need to be made aware of the dangers of this drug and to try to talk to your kids and do the best you can. I mean, you're powerless against it, so it has a huge effect and consequences on everybody that is involved, and I don't think people really understand that. So I have twins, and they were crazy, fed off of each other, being little nut jobs and cutest little boys, blonde hair and blue eyes, look just like me, obviously. And just very, very accomplished athlete and artist. So he played travel ball, was a pitcher, was a really, really good, very active kid. And his favorite toy in the whole entire world was, when he was little, he had those little green and tan army men that you bought they were at like the checkout counter or whatever. And he probably had 1,000 of them. And he would set them up, everything very precise in a row. So he was very organized. Little crazy in his head, but very organized. And that was his favorite thing to do, was the whole entire house, he'd have them and make, he had like the Playmobiles and the little caves and stuff, and he could keep himself busy for hours. He also played basketball, which he loved, and he played soccer for a very brief amount of time. But he was a very busy kid, very, very smart, high IQ, just was always trying to figure out, the next thing that he could do. Had a lot of friends. We lived in a very nice neighborhood that on our street, there was probably, on the one street we lived on, probably 9 boys, all the same age. So it just worked out that way. It was crazy. And you just come out of your house, and we would see like a caravan of all of them on their little BMX bikes, riding around, playing airsoft. Very, very busy, good in school, had a lot of friends, just very nice family life. He was a good kid, nice boy. Loved his friends, the kindest, most generous person, and protective, very, very protective. So if somebody was being bullied, and Carson was too, that's his brother, somebody was being bullied by other kids or something like that, I was very proud of him for that. They would step in and take care of the kids, or, tell them that's not cool. So he was a kind soul, a good boy. Both of my kids are very artistic, and Carson, whimsical, funny and sarcastic. Ethan, he wrote a book and published it himself. And his writings, which he has an Instagram page, which is still active. His writings are dark and deep, and I don't want to say disturbing, but it comes from something that is just probably inside his head that was torturous for him. He was also, there's a publication called Sam 54. And I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's a smaller publication. It's 4 years now, and they do 4 editions a year. The first one that was ever published, they probably get maybe 5,000 or 6,000 entries. And they picked 54, which is why it's called Sam 54, and Ethan was in the first one. So he was a paid published author. And they're all, it's, an addict inside their head. Typically, I don't want to say typically, but a lot of times an addict is very high functioning, intelligent, and it's the addiction that takes over their brain, and it's something that they need to focus on something else to stimulate their brains. And being him and out of rehab so many times, I've been well educated on a lot of the information, unfortunately. And he was published, and then he passed away pretty soon after the publication came out. So it comes out every quarter. The next quarter, the whole entire publication, the forward was dedicated to him. And so he had a lot of tattoos, and they were very meaningful tattoos. So he found a picture of my parents when they went to prom. They were high school sweethearts. And he tattooed the picture on his arm of my parents. And he had a lot of meaningful, he was very religious and spiritual. So he believed in everything and was very open-minded. Was he the best kid in the world? And did he got into trouble? He was a little shithead a lot of times. We get it. His downward spiral started when his dad and I separated. Kids, I don't want to say just in my situation, but most of the kids gravitate, even during divorce, no matter what the situation, they gravitate towards the mom. It's just the way that it is. It's mom, or I'm going home, or I'm going to dad's house. Mom's home. And it's just a fact of life, not just me. But I think that Ethan was always trying to get John's attention more and get him to be more active and integrated into his life, and it just didn't work out that way. So he became more and more withdrawn and more troubled. And, our divorce was, there, you get divorced for a reason. It got contentious, but we never used attorneys. It was never the horrible, there were horrible parts of it, but it was never, we tried to keep the kids, we still had dinners together. So we tried to keep them integrated. And then when he got a girlfriend, it made it worse. Right. So still tried to, keep things as easy as we could. But, it's hard on kids. It's just hard on kids. And John was more the tough love. I was more the, I'm going to help him any way I could. And there's no right or wrong. I don't fault him for that at all. Push came to shove, he would be there 100%. There's no doubt in my mind. But it was too difficult for him. And then he, didn't want him at the house because of his situation. And I understand that, so that was hard on Ethan too. Because, John didn't want him over there because, he was a drug addict and she had a kid. And I understand that, it's a hard situation. I don't know if I would want that around, but Ethan took it very hard. And he was in and out of rehab probably 15, 16 times. Sent him to a wilderness camp in Utah, which he loved, lived off the land. It was the best experience. Every time he came home, he's like, I'm better. And then usually he would relapse within a week and that would be a long time. So it was very, very sad and every place that he went, it was, the doctor's like, he's one of the most hardcore addicts I've ever seen. Just could not get past it. And he got arrested a couple times, and not for drugs though. He got arrested for, he was at my house and punched a wall, and his brother called the cops, and I'm not pressing charges, but it's domestic violence, and they took him. And then another time he was arrested for fighting. We were taking him somewhere, and we were in a parking lot. It was me and his dad and him, and somebody called the cops when we were outside arguing, and they arrested him. So it was never, but the second time, insurance is a bitch and, it's difficult and insurance was under me. So I bore the brunt of it and, I didn't get any help. So it was all my financial responsibility. And the second time we kind of decided we were going to not let him stay in the system, but get some help that way. So he went into a juvie center over in Mesa and did very well there, and actually, unfortunately missed out on high shool. And that was one of the times he relapsed when, went to Carson's high school graduation, where they both should have graduated together. And I'm like, should he come? Should he not come? And so relapsed that night. And when he wound up going to the juvenile center, and they were going to let him out and go to this one other rehab, and I said no, because it was a horrible place. I mean, some of them are wonderful and some of them are just awful. So we opted to have him stay in there. He wound up getting his GED in 99 percentile. And the GED is not like 2 + 2, 4 + 4 anymore. It's like taking an SAT. They're crazy. And so they had a whole graduation ceremony. There was like 8 kids that did it, and a big part. It was wonderful. I went with my mom. John refused to go. So that set him off, because he goes, I'm not going to go watch him graduate in a juvenile detention center. I go, but he's graduating. He's in a cap and gown. He's graduating. And so, things like that, he was difficult for Ethan. It was a beautiful ceremony. I mean, he has a picture in cap and gown holding his diploma like everybody else does. So I felt bad for him, but I'm very, very proud of him. He worked the steps, like he got out and was... got a job. He was always very responsible that way. And I always let him come back home. And, I was like, you can't keep doing it over and over and over again. But, also I wasn't to the point where you're just going to go live on the street. He's 19, 20 years old. I'm not going to let him live on. I'm just not going to. If I have the means to help him, it's just not going to happen that way. So eventually I might have gotten to that point where no, but, it was the same old thing, stole from me, but when he would steal, he would sit there and tell me afterwards. He's like, do you know where this is? And I'm like, I would look at him, I'm like, so you took it, didn't want to tell me, but he would ask me if I knew where it was, because he knew then that I would find out that he took, and I would have never even known. So he always had a lot of case of, guilt, but he went to a place down on Indians, or was McDowell, YDI, it's called Youth Development Institute, and was there for quite a long time. And I went every weekend. Like, he would go to Casa Grande. I would drive every other day to go see him. Didn't matter where he was, because I would always go see him. And, he'd be there maybe 6 or 7 months, and his father would never go, not once. So when he was in YDI, he got out of there, and they asked him to come back and speak as an alumni to the other kids, because he was trusted and helped everybody. He was a very helpful man. Always wanted to help people. And so when I was driving him home, I had to stop and get gas, and Carson was with me because we all went together. And I think it was maybe 10th Street in McDowell, not a great area. And so some homeless man or whatever, you could tell he was in a really bad way, came up and asked if I had any money. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I didn't have any cash. I said, I'd buy you food or whatever you need. I'm sorry, I don't have any money. And Ethan came up to me and he's like, grabs my purse, which I always throw my change on the bottom of my purse. He goes, Mom, you have money. I'm like, no, Ethan, honestly, look in my wallet. He goes, no. He goes, look at all this money you have in here. He goes, you probably have $30 in quarters and change. So he went inside and got a cup, filled it all up. Yeah. And gave it to him. I said, okay. He goes, no, I want to give it to him. And the man came over and he's like, I just want to say, what a wonderful young man. He goes, Mom, wouldn't you want somebody to help me if I needed it? And that's, and it's such a small part of who he was. But when you think about that, it's like, you have money. He goes, look at all this money that you have. And, he goes, you would want somebody to do that for me, wouldn't you? And I'm like, yeah, I would. So that's the kind of person he was. I mean, could be just a horrible, when he was like, he would be high and we'd be screaming at each other. And I'm like, you're going to die. This is what's going to happen. And then he would just start crying. He's like, just hug me and hold me, because they need and crave physical attention and touch and stuff like that, because they feel like nobody loves them. And his best friend, 3 years before he passed away, best friend since kindergarten, and very, very smart, was already in medical school because he graduated early, highly intelligent, and passed away from, he had a prescription to Xanax. And he didn't think he had enough to make it through the weekend because he was studying. And so, just was stressed out about school and was living in Tempe while he was going to ASU, and went down to Tempe and bought a couple of Xanax off the street and died. And so I went with I went to Ethan to the funeral, and there was a million people. It was the saddest thing you've ever seen. It was just horrible. And I was friends with his mother. And I said, I looked at him, I go, that's going to be you. I go, 100%. This is going to be you in the next couple of years if you don't stop what you're doing. It will. And the next time I saw, his name was Alex. The next time I saw Alex was at Ethan's celebration of life. So you never know. I mean, both came from, successful, upper middle class families. Never anything you wanted, you had, within reason, obviously, but sure. Trips, want to go out to eat, clothing.
A good quality.
Yeah, a nice life. Never worried about, God, I hope there's going to be food on the table, or I hope, when I got divorced, it was stressful for me because I walked away from everything and got nothing, and happily so, because just wanted to be done. But, I never got any help financially, and they were always with me. So it was a struggle. So never told them, but it was be like, do I want to feed them or do I want to put gas in my car? And, I pulled myself out of it quite well. And I'm, not very successful, but successful now, and able to take care of many things on my own and travel and I take Ethan with me everywhere. He was cremated, and he's traveled the world with me: London, Amsterdam, Paris, Italy, Mexico, everywhere. So I take Germany. He's been all over the world and comes with me everywhere, and Carson. And so, I try to talk about him, and I've been very vocal on my Facebook page and Instagram and posting things. And I have a lot of friends that reach out to me, or even strangers that ask for help, and they're, I'm not sure. I go, if you think they're doing it, they're doing it. So this is what, if you have a suspicion that this is what's happening, this is exactly what's happening. So don't think, okay, and shut your eyes. And then another friend of mine, that she's like, oh no. And he passed away 3 years ago. And she's like, oh, he just made a mistake. It was just one time, and it wasn't. And then she did a little bit of research and found, and I'm like, you walk around with blinders on about what you think is happening in your life, and it's because you don't want to deal with it. And it's easier just to say, oh, they'll be fine, or they're just smoking a little pot, or they're doing something like that. It's not. It's not, because the behavior change. And when Ethan, I sent him to Florida because he had relapsed again. I'm like, I just want to get him as far away as possible. Just as far away as possible. And we made a deal. He was going to stay there a year. He was in a rehab, stepped up to a sober living, got a job. I went out there, and it was during COVID. I hate saying during COVID, but, and he didn't want to go, but I took him to the airport. I go, you're going. And that's all there is to it. And so I went out and then when COVID hit, it was in March, and I was like, I was supposed to go out there in April or May for his birthday. April's his birthday. And everything got, you couldn't really go anywhere or do anything. And I was like, okay. And then I kept saying I was going to go. And then he finally said to me, he goes, you keep saying you're coming out here and you haven't. And so right then in my head, I booked the trip immediately, like that day. And I went out in August. So that's how far it got pushed out. I went out in August and flew out there, and we had a wonderful time. I met his girlfriend. He was a manager at Pizza Hut, so like one of the small, so he had a full-time job, and they trusted him. He did the batches, did all the money and everything. So he was entrusted with a big responsibility, and very proud of himself. And all he kept saying was like, "I want to come home. I want to come home." I'm like, "You can come home," and then he got permission to come home for a visit. So in October, it was my mom's birthday. And about 2-3 weeks before, he got in a huge fight with his father and said some stuff to me too. And I said, Ethan, I go, if you continue on like this, our relationship's never going to be the same. I said, you have to stop. I've always been there for you. You've never been deserted. So he was like, I'm sorry, I love you. And John, on the other hand, went the opposite direction. And you're a piece of shit. You're not my son. I never want to speak to you again. And everything. And Ethan was like, please, blocked him on everything. So could not get in touch with him. And then Ethan was calling me distraught because Ethan was very sensitive. He was. And just like Carson is more like me. I don't care. I don't care if you like me, but Ethan was more like my sister, where I want people to like me, and I can't stand if somebody's mad at me. He was very much like that. So Ethan was texting him from a friend's phone. And then John said, he goes, I'm blocking your piece of shit friends too. I mean, it was terrible. And Ethan was so upset. And he was coming home. And I said, you'll make up with your dad. And I said to John, I said, if something, God forbid, something happens to him, you need to make it right. You'll never forgive yourself. And then I got a phone call. I was walking through the quarter in Scottsdale, getting ready to go to work. And I answered my phone, and they're like, and I see he was coming home that day. And I couldn't get a hold of him. And I was like, and my mom called, she goes, Ethan's not responding. I'm like, oh, I'm sure he's fine. Every time I think that, he's like, you always worry about nothing. So I'm like, I'm not going to worry about it. I look down and I see a Florida number, and I answered the phone. I'm like, hey, baby, what's up? And my last text was like, I'll meet you at Sushi Brokers for dinner right when you land, because his friend was going to pick him up. And they were like, Miss Hornacek. And I'm like, and I knew. And right when they had it, some people were walking towards me that I knew. They're like, hey. And I was just, and the people at his restaurant, he didn't batch the numbers. So like the district manager called his general manager, and they're like, no, Ethan knows how to do it. And it was a buddy system. Nobody was ever supposed to leave one person alone. And Ethan kept saying, just go ahead and go. And this guy shouldn't have left. It's not his fault. But he said he waited outside, and Ethan didn't come out, so he left. I'm like, why wouldn't you have just gone back inside? He would have been, but he didn't. And so they went over there at like 5 o'clock in the morning, and he'd been there all night. And the doctor said he probably, the second he shot up, it was done, because it was poison. And when they didn't know where they took him, so I had to call every hospital in Florida, like in this area, till I found him. And they're like, well, it's HIPAA law. I was like, I don't care. I'm his mother. Just tell me if he's there. So the doctor called me back, and they're like, we're working on him. And he'd been down for, 7 hours, 8 hours, and still alive though. So, and then I called John and told him, and he's like, well, let me know how he is when you get there. I go, he's on life support and he's going to die. So you should probably go out there. I'm leaving as soon as I get a flight. And flew out there. Thank God, thank God it was in Florida. And I was engaged at the time, so I was with somebody as well. And got off the plane and went straight to the hospital. And instead of taking me in to see him, they took me to the chapel and explained everything. And I was like, so she goes, well, they're doing this, and this. And I said, so there's a chance. She goes, I always would love to be proven wrong. So that's all I heard was, can't be as bad as they're telling me. So she kept talking. I said, I just want to see him. I don't want to hear anymore. I just want to see him. So we walked into the ICU, and like, it's a big circular area. And as I'm walking through, I could see into his room, and he was hooked up to dialysis and every machine possible and intubated. And I knew. And so I didn't, they kind of had to sit me down, and they're like, we're going to give you a sedative. I'm like, no, I'm okay. I just need to get my composure. And then he was on life support for 6 days. And then they did the, the EEG, and, I didn't know how to read it. And, like there was blood in his urine, and then there wasn't, and his legs were all purple because they found him sitting Indian style. And so I was out, my fiance was out, John and his wife were out, Carson came out, my parents came out, his parents came out, everybody came out, and I never left the hospital. I never left. And then they let me stay because I was like, I'm going to be the one that you're going to arrest because you're not letting me see my kids. So, it's not going to be good. They were very nice about it. And they had a one by one kind of everybody left. And after we saw the EEG, and, I didn't understand it. And the doctor came in and she showed this. She goes, this is a normal one. And this is your son's. So, it was of the weirdest time. It was like the best time because just sat with him and talked the whole time. And, he would squeeze my hand and they're like, it's hold up 2 fingers, hold up a thumb. If he can't say, do those commands, squeezing or crying or his eyes tearing is just a reflex. So he was as giving as he went to donate his organs. So by this time, everybody had left. It was just me, John, and Carson. And I felt terrible for John because they never got to make up. I'll tell you something. These people that do the organ harvest, organ donations are good for them. And I understand that it's a very difficult job. They're less than truthful in the situation because they said it was going to be like in a room, like it was going to be dark. You have music playing. There's only going to be a couple people in there. It's going to be very intimate and personal. Well, you got in there. It was seriously an operating room. There was 15 people in there to harvest. It was awful. Absolutely awful. He was covered from here and then so we sat with him and it was just terrible. And they give you 90 minutes for him, not to be rude, but for him to die because they have to harvest immediately. And that I understand. However, the doctors are all standing like this and it was awful. And his heart never slowed down. So I think at like 60 minutes, I said, no, I'm done. Because I go, this is just terrible. So they moved him up into hospice where he stayed for 3 days. So they took everything off and he looked so peaceful and calm. And they made a bed for me in his room with him. So I stayed. And then the last night, John would come back and forth and bring me food and things like that. And he had the people from his sober living. We let them come in and visit. And the 3 grown men just sat there and cried. I said, this is going to be you guys. Look, this is your friend. And he passed away at like 10 o'clock at night and then came home and we did a celebration of life. I work at a restaurant up north and I've been there since day one and wonderful people, family owned, and they shut the whole place down and paid for everything. And I said, there's going to be like 100 people here. And they're like, oh, that's great. There was 450 people there. He had a lot of tattoos and I have tattoos too. And some of them are his and they have ashes in them of his ashes. And the guy that does them, we have a private room in the back. It's open, but it's like you can make it private. And he came in and set up a whole tattoo parlor and took 20 tattoos off of Ethan's body, like a sheet of them, and gave free tattoos all night just for donations. And he must have done 50 tattoos and gave me the money. And then I turned around and gave it to a life recovery church so I could keep it. And it was just like I felt like I had to do the celebration of life quickly to, I didn't want to wait. I wanted it to be celebrated and him be remembered right away. So there was so many, it was insane how many people were there. It was like, I don't even really remember it, but we had the typical videos and the music, but we had a beautiful living tree that everybody wrote notes on and there were flowers everywhere and candles everywhere. And it was beautiful. It was really, really beautiful. And people came from, all over the country, and his girlfriend came out from Florida. And, it was it was difficult, very difficult. So seeing that, and I saw his friends, and I'm like, look, I go, here's another celebration of life you're going to, guys. Here you are again, and they're 21 years old. And here's another one. All my pictures, it's funny because whenever I have any pictures of Ethan, he's like this, holding me or hugging me or laying on me or on top of me. He's always has his arms wrapped around me, always. And so like a lot of people said, God, his pictures is always like all over you. And like my kids are always have been everything to me. So I felt right when I got home, and I'm very spiritual and I believe in so many things. So right when I got home, my house has the 12-foot ceilings and, there's the cam lights. I've been in this house for 8 years. The light over the fireplace has never worked once, not once, ever. And I walked in that day when I got home from Florida and the light was on, which was bizarre. So I'm like, okay, maybe. And I've reached out to several people. But Ethan, and the other pictures that I have is Ethan, I got a puppy. Name is Roger, and another one named Owen. But every picture with Ethan, this dog is laying on top of him, sitting with him, sleeping with him, always. So I walked in the house, and I'm looking for Roger, and very, very strange. Never in a million years, he was in my bedroom, in the back of my closet, behind all my clothes, shaking. And so, talking to people are like, oh, the spirit comes in with you and things. So it's very emotional. But this dog literally laid on my bed. He's a pit bull, okay? So laid on my bed on top of my chest, shaking and like just shivering the whole entire night. So I felt horrible for him. And can be very aggressive if he doesn't know you. So I'm cognizant of that fact. And like, I don't just have people like, hey, come on in. So one of my friends and the girl, Lori and Joe, and they know these people too, Kim Courtney. So her son had passed away, but from a disease. And she bought me this reading from this lady, Lisa Wilcox. She's a Phoenix medium. So she's coming over to my house, and I said, let me know when you're here so I could put Roger outside. I go, he's kind of aggressive. And and she goes, oh, I get it. So she's outside, and she said, before she came in, she goes, she just had this weird feeling. And so I said, I'm going to put him outside. She goes, no. I go, I put him outside. And she comes in, she goes, let him in. I said, I'm not letting him in. I go, he does not know you. Trust me, he's going to growl and bark in your face. He's never been anybody, but I'm not going to take that chance. She goes, let him in. And I let him in. This dog walked up to her, sat down, laid down on the floor, and never moved. It was so bizarre. And she said, the stuff that people tell you are just bizarre, and you want to believe it, but you just can't understand it unless you've been through it. So everything she said was crazy. Like I have a heart that I wear around my neck. And I do. I have a heart, and this is his ashes. And that these pictures that were like in my bedroom, and that the music that was playing when Ethan was there, all this crazy stuff. And then I went to, and it's a very powerful connection. So I went to this lady that she's nuts. And most of these mediums are crazy. So I went to a group reading. And I'm driving out to Apache Junction, and all I'm saying is like, if this is true, Ethan, be the first person. If this is true, because there's 12 people, I'm like, just be the first one. Just be the first one. Talking to him. I get there, I sit down. There's 12 people there, and it was still pretty fresh. And she's walking around and looking at everybody, and it's usually people looking for their parents or their grandparents. And the lady that owned the place, her daughter passed away from an overdose as well. So I've known her for years and years and years. So she comes up to me and she goes, yeah, Farrah said there's somebody very young here tonight. She goes, don't say anything to her. I'm like, what am I going to say? So I'm sitting there, and I'm just going, just be first, just be first. So she's walking up to somebody. She's like, your mom. And then she looks at me, and I'm just sitting there, and she walks back away, and she's like, your mother, and she's looking at me, and she goes, I am so sorry. She goes, but your son is here, and he will not shut the fuck up. And went through how nobody knew this, where he was, what room he was in, how he was at work, what time, how many people were there, how I got there first, the music that was playing, how thank you for taking him off life support because he didn't want to live like a vegetable. That was an accident. And I lost 2 diamonds in my ring, which I did. It was crazy. So when people say I have stuff happen to me all the time. All the time. I mean, I could tell 1,000 stories of it. So you and I get, like, I've been to several of them, and they all give me a different story of different parts of his life and things that have happened. And so for me, it makes me feel closer. But like, I was laying in bed. It's funny because I had just booked this, and I'm laying in bed. All my lights are off. I'm watching TV. Ethan, Roger's sitting next to me. And he's looking like this, and he stares in the corner because I have videos of lights going off and on in my house and like voices that you can hear. It's crazy. And I have videos of them on my phone because I video, but I'm sitting there and I'm laying in bed like this, and and my eyes go like this, and I look over, and I have a parlor lamp that's just, and it just turned on by itself. And I'm just sitting there and I'm like, what the fuck? And then you hear, and Roger just staring up there. And they're like, you have a very powerful sense. And I don't say like anybody's talking to me, but I'll wake up in the middle of the night and my whole entire house or in my bedroom will smell like orange blossoms. My windows don't open. I don't have any fruit trees or citrus trees. And the whole house smells like orange blossoms. It's bizarre. And I always say, like, he's stuck. Like, there's something that he didn't get to do. And they're like, no, nobody's stuck. Nobody's in between worlds. They're there or they're here. So, I mean, I go to the fact that, like, there are people that excel at basketball that can make a 3-point shot 100 times in a row. They can crazy savants at math or have an incredible voice or can play a pianist concerto or whatever. So there's all these things. So in my mind, there's got to be, or I think that everybody's brain is different. So can it be possible that people could communicate? I have to believe yes, because there's so many things that people can do, and that's all part of your brain. So I know I probably sound crazy and I don't care, but if it makes me feel better and like I can sit there and somebody's talking to me or somebody's reaching out to me and I've had people that have witnessed it with me, so they can't dispute it anymore. So that stuff happens. I was in New York with my girlfriend, and she took me for my birthday, and her daughter lived there, and I'm standing like this. We're brushing our teeth, getting ready for bed, and we're facing this way, and there's the hallway. We're both brushing our teeth, and at the exact same time, both of us went like this, and you could see somebody running past in the room. And a kid, blue shorts and green shirt. We both saw it. And I'm like, I looked at her, I go, did you see that? She goes, because I've told her things that have happened. And she's like, what was that? And I'm like, stuff happens to me all the time. But this is what freaked her out, because that you could have been like, okay, it was a shadow or something. Went to bed. I had on like a fake leather skirt, so it's called pleather. Pleather skirt, black pleather skirt. Went to bed. We had all our stuff packed up. I had that skirt on. I took it off. It was on top of my clothes. Woke up in the morning and the whole entire, not in a weird way, but the whole entire skirt was shredded, destroyed. There's nobody in the room. And I picked it up and I showed her. I go, Kelly, she's like, what? So I said, if you want to dispute now that things happen to me, now you can't, because you just witnessed firsthand of going to bed and my skirt looking like this and coming up and looking like it was completely shredded. So you can sit there and doubt me every day and all day long, but there's no way that he's not around and messing around with me all the time. I think the lesson is that from beginning to end, the lesson is, first of all, pay attention to your kids. There's nothing more important than them, and they can never be replaced. A bad relationship, and I hate to say it like that, is a bad relationship. There's always somebody else out there, and if there isn't, who cares? I mean, honestly, you can always replace a man or a partner, and I hate to say it like that. You can never replace your children, ever. And that, make no mistake that if you're suspicious, you're right, and it's going to happen. The other lesson is that I believe that Ethan was too kind and too sensitive and too tortured to be here. And that he is there for a reason. And I know when people, I don't, and frankly, do I care? I don't give a shit what the reason is. I don't care when they say, well, God has a reason. I really don't care what the reason was. I prefer him to be here. But the people that he has helped and the awareness that I have gotten out to other people, there's a reason why. And I get that now. The Not My Kid, I was saying earlier, I've worked with Not My Kid, which is an organization that was started by two parents that their child was mental health and addiction. It's grown into a huge nationwide nonprofit. And last year, I was privileged enough to speak, and it was extremely impactful. And through the whole entire, there's 2,500 people there. So through the whole entire auctions and this, it was so loud and people were blah, blah, blah. And then my video came on and you could hear a pin drop. It was dead silent for people to understand that, just because somebody's an addict or they suffer or they struggle, there's people there that really love them. And all they care about is that they get better, get help, or turn their life around. And just because they don't doesn't mean they didn't still love them. It's very sad that people just are so judgmental. And you're wrong to do that. Because the next time you turn around, it's going to be somebody that you know, or it's going to be your child. And it happens like that. These people go out and they take, I don't do drugs, obviously, but the people that they're at a bar and they want to do whatever, ecstasy or Molly or something like that. And you buy it and you die. And that's the fact. So you think you're going to have fun. You're thinking, really, go do a shot of tequila, okay? I mean, you'll get the same effect. I don't know because I've never done any of those, but you're not going to get, you're risking your life. It is literally Russian roulette. The day Ethan was brought into that hospital, or that morning or whatever, 5 other boys were brought in, the same strain, or overdosed for the same shit. He's the only one that died because the other ones were brought in right away. So if they had found him, he would have been okay. Probably would he have made it another 4 years? I don't know. But it's such a struggle because you think, I just want this to be over. It's so hard. It's so hard. It's so hard. I would give anything to fight with him again about it, really. And I went to every meeting with him. Always went to his NA meetings or AA meetings. Always support. Always. And I love that he asked me to go with him. Was it my favorite way to spend a night with a bunch of addicts outside smoking and then going inside and listening to their stories? Probably not. But I got to be with him. So it was okay. I would have taken that any night of the week over going out to a bar or hanging out with my friends, 100%.